Welcome to Invisible Machines, a podcast where we explore the expanding world of AI agents and conversational technologies. I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, a best-selling book all about the agentic approach to automation and the pursuit of organizational AGI. I'm joined each week by Robb Wilson, CEO and co-founder of OneReach.ai. Robb and I wrote Age of Invisible Machines over countless hours of conversation, much like the ones we have each week on this podcast. Robb has spent decades researching and deploying conversational technologies, and Invisible Machines is where we share big ideas with fellow AI insiders. We're continuing these conversations in partnership with UX Magazine because attention to experience design is critical to the proper deployment of AI agents, or invisible machines. Today, we're excited to bring you another in-action episode with Daniel Lametti, Associate Professor of Psycholinguistics at Acadia University, visiting fellow at the University of Oxford, and Senior Academic Advisor to OneReach.ai. Within a mere matter of months of tinkering with AI agents, Daniel has put himself in position to update his title to psycholinguist and software developer. Using low-code conversational building tools, he's been able to create a whole host of agents, including a basic one that operates around the objective of writing and sending emails. In this in-action episode, Dan shows us how he built this agent, first setting its objectives, and then creating a task flow connecting it with an email client. We also spend some time here talking about the diminishing role of coding languages in a world where machines can communicate in human language. As with all of our in-action episodes, this one is a visual demonstration of agentic software. Daniel shares his screen as he walks us through this agent build, and we recommend watching it on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Also, Daniel was on campus at Oxford when we recorded this episode, and you'll hear some occasional academic reverie just outside his door. So enjoy this lively in-action episode with our friend Daniel Lametti. Invisible Machines is produced for UX Magazine in partnership with OneReach.ai. Named a leader by every major analyst group, OneReach.ai's Generative Studio X platform was built specifically to facilitate the no-code orchestration of AI agents. GSX is trusted by global giants like PepsiCo, PwC, Deloitte, and DHL, but anyone can experience the level of agent orchestration we talk about on this podcast through interactive demos at OneReach.ai. Now, on with the show. All right, well, Dan, we're really excited to have you back on the show to walk us through AI agents doing some email work for us. I think we've talked a lot on this show, and we talk a lot in our book about the power of AI agents operating our software for us, but it's really impactful, I think, when we can see what that looks like. And I think email is a great place to start because no one really seems to look forward to checking their inbox or responding to emails and dealing with that mess every morning. So let's take a look at how AI agents might change that experience. You're especially interesting to talk to about this stuff because, you don't think of yourself as a developer, even though over the past several months, you've been developing a lot of software. And I think that's happening by virtue of how much easier it has become to essentially write software conversationally. What kind of impact has that had on the way you look at technology and the way you look at sort of your capability as a human with good ideas?
Yeah, the changes that we've seen in terms of large language models enabling us to, have effectively conversations with machines, with computers, and to build software through these conversations. The change is remarkable in that we can produce apps, produce pieces of software just a lot faster than we would have been able to, even a year ago or 2 years ago. And in this case, I was really interested in AI agents. I've been hearing this term everywhere, like AI agents. And as an academic, I, want to know like where did this term originate from, and what distinguishes an AI agent from, let's say, just like a standard large language model. So any interaction that you would have with ChatGPT. And so I dug around a bit and came across this 2023 preprint from researchers at Google on chain of thought prompting. And I know that, Rob, you're familiar with this, but the idea here, right, is that we're instructing a large language model to decompose problems into steps and to solve the problem one step at a time, kind of like how a human would solve a problem. And when we do this, when we prompt large language models in this way, we get responses that are just much more accurate, right?
Yeah.
And this chain of thought prompting seems to be sort of the idea that is really at the heart of an AI agent, in that they're, I struggle to use the word thinking because I'm a cognitive psychologist, and I believe that, thoughts are sort of complex things that exist in human minds that don't really exist in machines. But, we can call it thought of a form. They're sort of thinking through the problem, step by step to come to a solution. I mean, so there's an example in that paper. So pretty simple, Roger had 5 tennis balls. He buys 2 more cans of tennis balls. Each can has 3 tennis balls. How many tennis balls does he have now? Right. And so, a standard LLM would just give you the response, 11. But an LLM instructed to solve this problem using chain of thought would actually break that down into, Roger started with 5 balls. He has 2 cans of 3 balls each. So that's 6 balls. 5 plus 6 is 11. The answer is 11, right? And this just leads to more accurate responses generally from these models. So
Yep.
Definitely a big step forward, I think, in that these models, and, my students have heard me say this so many times, these models really struggle with things like logic and reasoning. And this is kind of like a step towards LLMs that do logic and reasoning a little bit better. The trick of the human mind, which I maybe haven't seen replicated yet in AI, is that we can decide to sort of think about a problem in a more slower, methodical way, as opposed to just giving the quick answer, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now we seem to have AI that can do one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Just give you the very fast response or give you the sort of slower, more thoughtful response. But presumably that will change in the future.
Yeah.
Thinking about, what else does an agent need? Okay, so it needs chain of thought prompting. It also needs guardrails, in that agents are highly focused on an objective of some kind. So solving a very specific problem, right? So I'm going to show you an agent that helps you compose an email and then actually sends that email. And as we'll see in the demo, it's highly focused on just doing that, right? Whereas a standard large language model, like an interaction with ChatGPT, you can ask it to compose you an email and then ask it, what the colors of the rainbow are, and it will veer off in that new direction.
Yeah.
Right? An agent won't do that. So that's important because, if we want, I think like the most effective use cases of these AI are highly specific, right? So like focused on specific tasks that they're sort of built for. And so having agents that, have these guardrails and can do very specific things is really important. The third component, in addition to chain of thought, in addition to, focused attention on a problem, is that agents can initiate real world actions, right? Which again, your standard chat GPT, large language model can't do. So my sort of journey into agents started with building an agent that helps users compose and then actually sends an email for them. Why that use case? As we were discussing at the start, right? Email management is like a major problem for most people. It's a problem in academia. But I've also seen a lot of students using ChatGPT to compose emails for them. Some of my colleagues are doing this as well. And you have to copy and paste the message right from the ChatGPT window into your email client. Wouldn't it be cool if an agent could just do the same thing and then just, send the email, drive your email client for you, right? Drive the software for you. And so that's kind of where my agent journey started. I wanted to build an agent that would help you compose and then send an email.
Oh, let's do it.
Let's take a look.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the agent builder in the OneReach GSX platform, and there's a bunch of tabs here, and really the key tab is the objective. So what's the purpose of this particular agent? And I've simply given it some instructions that it's a polite AI that helps users compose persuasive emails. It starts with a particular message every time. Hi, I can help you write email. What kind of email would you like? And then it asks the user for some information, such as, the recipient's name and email address, to sort of fine-tune the email before collecting all of the required information to actually send the email. So this is the agent's objective, and as we'll see in a second, it'll be hyper-focused on this particular objective. Now, agents also have actions, so skills that they can perform in the real world. This particular agent has 2 actions. So it has the functionality of being able to have a conversation with the user, like a standard large language model. This is the say action here. And it also has the send email action.
And say is really just like if they go off script. It's like people break the AI ultimately. Like, what's the meaning of life? And so it doesn't just, break, just accommodates patiently, unlike me.
Yeah.
Yes, and then steers you back towards the objective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Politely. Relentlessly and politely.
Yeah. And then we have the send email action. And, what this action does, it doesn't actually send the email. We actually do that in a separate process, but it collects all of the required information from the interaction to then drive the sending of an email through an additional step. And I'll show you that in a second. But let's just take a look at, how this agent behaves. So in the right panel here, we can interact with it to test whether the objective that we set is actually, being followed. And so we can see the initial message here. Hi, I can help you write emails. What kind of email would you like? So let's do something basic like, I'd like my roommate to do the dishes, right? So a problem that we've encountered at some point in our lives, probably.
In this case, it's gotten so bad that you have to send an email.
That's right. Yeah. Well, this is like, we're in, it used to be when I was in university, you would write this on a sticky note, right? And passively, aggressively leave it like on the fridge. But now you can.
Yeah. So most of my friends received these, didn't send these, but yeah, I get it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so let's just take a look at, what it produced in response. Okay. So I'd like my roommate to do the dishes. And so we can actually see the thought process here. So chain of thought prompting leads to this intermediate thought. The user wants to draft an email requesting their roommate does the dishes. I will create a polite and persuasive email for this request. So it's using actually language from the objective itself. And then you get a draft of the email down here. Here's a draft of your email. Subject line, quick reminder about dishes. And then there's some information that we have to fill in, but the email looks pretty reasonable, very friendly. It would really help keep the space clean and enjoyable for both of us if you do the dishes. So this looks pretty good. Let's add some information. So we can say my roommate's name is Josh. Sorry, Josh, but
For the record, I don't mind doing the dishes.
And so now if we can give it some more information, my name is Dan.
And if we wanted to, at this point, you could even add like, hey, maybe mention that doing the dishes can be a very calming exercise.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, there'd have to be a couple of slots in here, a human in the loop, because it won't add profanity. And that's probably required to actually get them to do the dishes. So you have to be like, okay, before I send this, please fill in the spaces for profanity because I can't.
I love it.
Do your
So here
effing dishes.
Here we've got Josh's suggestion added here. Doing the dishes can actually be quite calming. In addition to keeping the space clean.
Yeah.
So that looks good. And, we can, again, what makes this an agent is that it's really focused on this particular task, right? So if I asked it some random question like, what's 2 + 2, it should recognize that this isn't related, right, to the question, to the objective. And so you can see its thought process here. The user is shifted to a math question, which doesn't relate to drafting an email. And so I'm going to gently, maneuver the user back to the objective here,
Nice.
which is what it did. So just to recap, we have an agent here that has an objective, and that objective is to help users compose persuasive emails. The agent has 2 actions. So an action called say that just involves the conversation, the interaction where the email is actually crafted. And then a send email action, which involves extracting the information from the conversation that allows the email to be sent.
Right.
So for instance, the
We're
body
basically
of the
just
message.
training an agent right now. But using natural language instead of code. We're just training it, telling it what we want it to do and what its objective is and that's it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's almost too simple. Like people will look for the complexity. It's just not there. There isn't. That was it.
Yeah, exactly.
Training it, ironically, almost was as hard as writing an email.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And, there's a few more steps to actually get this like working within an application, and we'll look at those in a second. But, the functionality of the agent is fully working. So let's ask for the draft again. So show me the draft again. Okay, and so that looks good. Now, it doesn't have all the information that it needs to actually send this email, right? It doesn't have an email address. So if I say send it, it should recognize that and ask for the email address. Yeah, and so, here it's recognized that it needs Josh's email address to actually,
Right.
send this email to somebody, right? And so...
Right. Now, in bot orchestration, if there was another Omni data agent that knew Josh's email address, it could have asked that first.
Yeah.
And then if the system, if in the digital twin it had an email address for Josh, it would just probably confirmed with you instead of asked you to type it in.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I could have also provided it with access to my inbox, right? Like
Right.
all of my, prior email exchanges with Josh, and then it would hopefully infer, right, that, is this the email? Is this the Josh that you're wanting to send this email to? And then, suggest an email address. So that's functionality that could be added. And it's, when you think about it, like if you were thinking about this problem 1 or 2 years ago, it would have seemed very complex, right? A very complex problem to solve.
Oh, yeah.
Having an AI that can do this and then perform an action and also have access to external databases.
Yeah.
But it's really not that hard now with agents. You can, build these AI very quickly.
And this is a basic one. I mean,
This is basic,
again,
yeah.
people think like this is complicated, but it's not, because this could could easily be, and maybe we'll show this in future episodes, but this could easily be evolved into taking account all of your past interactions with Josh when constructing this email, being like, okay, this is the third time I've had to ask you in the last 3 months about the dishes. Like this is all possible. It's just iterating and giving it that access to that history, which it has. If it's sent all 3 of them, I think a lot of people overcomplicate this idea of software, not realizing that most of the time it's just an interim communicator. It's just facilitating communication between one or more people, and it's at some point it just stores it and then sends it on. So there's data in and then there's data out. And so at some point AI, as long as it can take the data in and structure the data out, it can replace a lot of the software we have.
Yeah. No, exactly. Okay, so just to finish off this interaction, I'll just give it a fictitious email here, josh.smith at, let's go with hotmail.com, just to be old school. And it has everything that it needs now. And so it's actually performed the action. And, when I say perform the action, the email isn't sent yet, but it's extracted all of the information required to send the email. And importantly, from a programming standpoint, right, it's put the information into variables, right? So we've got the body of the email here, the sender's name, the receiver's email, and the subject line. And these are all in individual variables that we can then, insert into our email client to actually send the email. So why don't we jump over to...
I think it's also important to point out that a lot of this interaction with our old software, like that JSON and the object, the data object, and all of this is sort of an interim step, right? If our email client just spoke natural language instead of this cryptic JSON language, it's almost like, Shakespearean, having somebody from that time having a conversation with us today, or we need a translator. But if our backend systems just spoke in natural language, this would even be easier. In fact, you could say our old software is what makes building agents even marginally more complicated. If it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for interacting with these old systems, and these old systems were AIs, this would be easier.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great point. There's a code step here, right, that wouldn't be required if computer programs just interacted using
just had LLMs. Yeah. If they all had their own ability to talk. Yep.
Okay. So let's go over to the actual conversational flow, and we can look at how this is inserted into a flow so that we can actually send the email and have a working application. And so if you're not familiar with conversation design, a conversational flow is just sort of the path of the interaction. And what's nice about agents is that they make flows very simple. So if I was to, build this same application using older conversation design methods, the flow would look much more complex. But here it's quite simple. We kick off the interaction. We say what kind of interaction we want. In this case, it's a rich web chat, so a texting-based interaction. And we have our agent here. This is our email agent that we built in the agent builder. And then off of the agent, right, we have our 2 actions. So we have our say action. This is the loop that basically allows us to build the email. And then we have our send email action. Right. And so that feeds into a step in the flow that actually, fills in the
Right.
information required to send the email. So we can now, with like the agent inserted into a flow that actually like commands the action, we can take a look at the application itself. So the chat where the action lives.
All right, Dan, let's take a look at the user side of this experience.
All right, so let's go with something sort of more abstract here. So Josh didn't do his dishes again.
Classic Josh.
Always letting us down with the dishes, Josh.
Sorry, guys. I was so caught up in agent building, I don't know what happened.
Oh, so it's asking me if I'd like an email to address Josh about doing the dishes.
See?
Yes.
And it's funny how, like, in demoing this, we immediately go to, like, asking it to send an email, but really, that's how we would say it to each other. Josh didn't do his email, like, his dishes.
Yeah. And then it's asking me for some information here. So my name, Dan, Josh, and I'll give Josh my email address. And any specific message to include. The dishes are okay. There we go.
Nice. Look at that. So super important to realize that the message began with Josh didn't do his dishes. There was no request, just a statement. And
yeah, and because it's focused on dish doing, right? It sort of knows to ask like, oh, are you requesting, that Josh do his dishes?
Right. So we see that these guardrails are really context as well. Like they help beyond just keeping it in line. We realize it also allows it to make assumptions about, things you want to do. Like what, why would you be talking to it? Since it's the email agent, it would assume that you're saying this for a reason. That's why it didn't just console you. And that's just how we work as humans, and that's huge. You didn't have to pre-program it in any way. It just got that.
Here we have the email in my inbox, and I sent this from a botmail account just because it's fast to set it up that way. But this could easily be set up so it's actually from.
So this
my
assumes
Gmail
that
account.
Dan does not have an AI.
Yes.
That he's still old school, using his inbox.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just an example of, a very simple AI agent that does, a very simple chore, which is like helping us compose an email and then, and then sending it.
But we know with enough emails from our AIs to Dan will be saying, I need to get an AI to respond to these.
Yeah.
We can see the proliferation of AI through this channel. It's like different from the fax machine where you needed another fax machine. You can ask your AI to remind Dan once a week about the dishes. At some point, Dan will get his own AI to respond back, and then they'll have a little AI spat between them.
Back and forth, yeah.
All right, Dan. Well, thanks so much for showing us this stuff today, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon here on Invisible Machines.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us again here on Invisible Machines. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Always remember that you can watch this podcast too on our Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Head over to uxmag.com. We have a podcast page there where you can explore our back catalog and you can look at episodes centered around popular topics. Many, many thanks to our incredible production team here in the US and in Ukraine: Elias Parker, Michael Litvinov, Allison Harshberger, Alla Slesarenko, Vera Pokodkov, and Darina Moskovchuk. Till next week, Owagi.